I'm Arya Schwartz, and welcome to the Winsidr Show, where it's all about the W. We are back with WNBA Stocks, where Owen Pence and I check the market in the WNBA. If you like our show, please consider joining our Patreon community. Patreon.com/Winsidr. For less than a cup of coffee a month, you can directly show support for the hard work we do covering the W. And don't forget to see our amazing staff's written content over at Winsidr.com. That's Winsidr.com. If you're looking to get tickets for the upcoming WNBA season, or I guess this WNBA season, thanks to our sponsor TickPick, you don't have to worry. The original no-fee ticketing site and official ticketing partner of the defending WNBA champion Chicago Sky. Use the link tickpick.com/Winsidr for all your upcoming ticket purchases for the WNBA, NFL, NBA, or any other event. Again, that's tickpick.com/Winsidr. We're back with WNBA Stocks, where we check the pulse on the market. Today is June 13th. Owen Pence, are we starting with up or down this week?
I'm feeling good. It's sunny out here in Brooklyn, New York. We had a great game in market yesterday. The Sky with a buzzer beating three to tear the hearts out of the Liberty faithful in attendance. It's a great game all around. Let's go stock up. Let's start things off on a positive note, and might be a good segue
A
to
perfect
your
segue.
to your to your stock up team, which just happens to be the one that I am in market for.
New York Liberty, got to be the stock up. Johannes joins the team, a team that was already trending up. And bam, they look so much better. I mean, her flow on this team really, it's almost like that children's book, The Missing Piece, where the wheel wasn't able to roll around because it was missing the piece. They now feel a little bit more complete, like they're. I mean, I'm going to say missing piece like 30 more times, and I think that's maybe an over exaggeration, but to the extent of just adding more of that style of player to this team is really what they needed. I would also want to point out that I think it's time to pull the plug on the Dolson experiment and just give all of her minutes to Han. Han has just been ridiculously impressive throughout. There are still some question marks. Natasha Howard's play hasn't been the high level of play that we've come to expect of her. But the way that Sabrina has been able to move off ball with the addition of Crystal Dangerfield on this team, and then just really do what she does best, which is move without the ball, facilitate for others, but hit big shots when she needs to, and just be there when her team needs her. The other thing that I think that this team really has going for them is Sandy Brondello. Like, yes, it's taken some time to really get a rhythm of things, to really make this team look like a competent team, better than we've seen over the past few years in New York, right? Like, they brought in Sandy because they were supposed to be taking a step forward in the future of this team. So they brought in a respected championship caliber head coach. And I think now we're starting to see that take form. And if you know Sandy Brondell and you followed her throughout her career, her teams are notoriously known for starting slow but ending real hot. So I have to say that's another reason for me in my mind. I'm looking at this team and going, wow, they're trending up. I'm sure you've got some, mind-boggling analytical stats to drop some on us, Owen. So I'll hand it off to you now.
I'm actually gonna go pure. I'm gonna make my dad proud here in this part of the show and just go old school eye test. I'm gonna have numbers later, especially as we get to the down stocks. But this is all just kind of stuff that I've soaked up from being lucky enough to attend these games and talk to the team on a regular basis. I think you nailed it. The only thing, and I can't believe I'm going to do this. If you've been a part of the Winsidr Slack for a while, you know that I've had some critiques of Steph Dolson's game over the years, but I'm actually going to defend her here for a second. I think that she's
Come
starting to
on,
hit her
man.
stride just a little bit, and the one thing she does best on the floor, yeah, I would say undeniably, is setting screens. It's something that doesn't show up in any numbers really, except if you get the super fancy advanced numbers, which the WNBA is never blessed with. But I mean, she is setting killer screens to get Sabrina open, and I think that the number one thing, obviously, with this team right now is that Sabrina is starting to look like the player that she was billed as. And I think one player who you didn't mention, who kind of everyone on the team has been talking about, and who actually arrived before Marine did, and obviously, Marine's addition to this team and what she brings is hugely essential. But Crystal Dangerfield is someone who's really lightened the load on Sabrina in very subtle ways, but bringing the ball up, just allowing Sabrina to be able to kind of conserve some energy in the parts of the game where everything was being made super difficult for her. We're now seeing Sabrina operate off the ball more, and with Marines, joining this team, it only furthers Sandy's freedom to be able to deploy Sabrina off the ball. And what we're seeing is she's just tearing these defenses apart with her shooting. I mean, her range extends to the logo. She's not afraid to shoot from there. And it kind of boggles my mind that some of these teams are still, using drop coverage against her and not immediately blitzing and trapping her off pick and rolls. You have to get the ball out of her hands. In the first quarter, yesterday against Chicago, I mean, she just put on a passing clinic in the pick and roll. And this team just is rounding into form, and I think Crystal Dangerfield being added to the roster, was honestly a huge part of that. So, is this a playoff team? There's still a lot of work to be done, and I don't want to get too carried away here. But I think they have the star player who can kind of take over a game, as we've seen a number of times from Sabrina over the past couple weeks. And now it seems like they finally have enough complementary players to kind of accentuate the strengths of their best players. And again, with Steph Dolson, I agree. Han has been way better. Han has been awesome. I mean, the best story of this team so far this year. But I kind of like her impact off the bench, right? She plays against the second unit. You can't have her immediately coming into the league for the first time in years and playing 32 minutes a game like starters would. I kind of like how Sandy is using her. Maybe 20 minutes is kind of this sweet spot where you can mix and match with her and Steph depending on matchups. But I do think that as much, criticism as Dolson can get, justifiably so in terms of what she brings on the court, I do think that her screen setting is kind of essential to this team and really pries open some space for the shooters on this team in a way that none of the other bigs can do.
Yeah, no, I hear that. I'm not gonna sit here and pat you on the back for a Steph Dolson compliment. I had to do it, folks. No, but I agree. I mean, I guess the long term concern I have is, what's going to happen when the hardship exam or the hardship contract for Crystal eventually comes to an end. What happens to this team? Are we going to see that just causes, the undoing? Are they going to be at a better place where they found other ways to supplement that? It's also been really, really interesting to see some of the Sandy quotes. I mean, if you love coach interviews, Sandy Brondello is one of the best coaches to have. She's made some fiery comments, not because the way she said it or whatever was so fiery, but just the narrative that's been put out about Crystal Dangerfield has been that she is a liability on defense, which I think we all can agree on to a certain extent. But Sandy's been talking about her defense in a positive light throughout her whole time in New York, which I think is a really, really interesting kind of twist on that. And yeah, I'm just excited to see where this team goes, as there's going to be some more motion in that roster, as some players hopefully come back from injury. We never want to see anybody down for injury. You have a team that you wanted to do up, and I'm going to be honest. When we were prepping for the show, I said, you know what, let's only do one team up. But you wanted to talk to them in a positive light, so you bring them up.
Let me do it, and I'm just gonna, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna put you on blast right here. Are
Do it.
they
Go for
in
it.
the show prep had the audacity to put forth the Seattle Storm as this week's stock down team, a team that just won 3 games in a row, has the Western Conference Player of the Week. I mean, I'm flabbergasted. I'm excited to hear what you have to say in that regard, because I think I probably will agree with some of what you're saying. But to me, this team is slowly trending in the right direction, I would say. There's still main areas for concern, namely the offense. They're eighth in offense right now. They're second in defense. Last week when we taped, they were ninth and third, so they're slowly, moving up the leaderboards. Um, I think the biggest positive that I want to mention is Ezi Magbagor, who anyone who follows me on Twitter knows, has been one of my favorite players in the league since her rookie season, leading the league in blocks, over 3 a game. I mean, just kind of destroying people on the defensive end, and really starting to grow offensively too. I mean, she's always shown flashes, and there's still times when it can look a little rough, but she's just getting better and better and making a bigger impact on the game this season than she ever has previously. I mean, Stewie is just playing at a ridiculous level right now after kind of her slow start to the season, largely due to having to miss a few games with COVID. But Stewie is just dominating right now and completely just the only real source of offense that this team is getting, during certain stretches of the game. Obviously, Jewel Lloyd is a prolific offensive player, and she's been, pretty decent from three this year. But I'd say she's had slightly less good season than her potential might indicate. Like, that was extremely poorly worded. What I'm trying to say is Jewel Lloyd can play better than this. That's what I'm trying to say. So Stewie's really picking up a lot of the slack right now, and I think that they kind of need. And I'm sure you're going to talk about the coaching element, which I think might be one of the reasons why we're not seeing like full meshing on the offensive end. But ultimately, I mean, Dallas is a playoff team last year. They're likely going to be a playoff team this year. And Seattle went into their building and won twice. They also beat Atlanta at home. It was a decently close game, and then Seattle pulled away in the final five. But I mean, that's 3 good wins in a week, and these are games that this team has really been struggling to eke out. I don't think this is sustainable if you're looking forward to the playoffs, because you're gonna have to start scoring at a better clip. It's undeniable. So I'll kind of pass the baton off to you here, because I'm sure that's notably what you want to talk about. And then the other weak spot here, the team is last in the league in rebounding, so they can't make any noise in the playoffs if the offense doesn't improve and if they don't start rebounding the ball. But ultimately, this team, largely due to Stewie and Ezzy, is slowly trending in the right direction.
Yeah, and I would say, like, look, when we talked about it, maybe I was going for the hot take reaction, maybe not, but I think it's pretty easy for me to sit here and go, yeah, they're trending in the right direction, but I don't know if it's enough of a movement in my eyes to say that they're a stock up. That's where my thing is, and it's kind of similar to what we were talking about when we had Connecticut in the stock down and up one week, or I almost did it up. You ended up doing them down. Just because when I look at this team, yes, they pulled off 3 wins. None of those wins had me sit back and go, oh, Seattle looks like a dangerous team again. None of those wins had me look back and go, oh, now I can feel confident in Seattle's next game. Yes, they beat Atlanta in Atlanta. A team that I think most of us expect to be, probably at this point in the season, what we're over a third of the way through, we consider them a playoff team just based on rankings, things like that, or a bubble playoff team if you want to look at it like that. Look, Seattle's playing good enough to make the playoffs as of now, which wasn't the case, 2 weeks ago. But at the end of the day, I have so many questions for the coaching staff. I don't exactly understand what they're trying to do in comparison to what's been successful over the past X amount of years. This team obviously has the talent. And yes, they're going to have to hide Sue Bird a little bit more. She's getting up there in years. It's not, unless you're living under a rock and haven't been following any of the mainstream news coverage. They don't have the firepower of Sammy and Clark. Fine. but they have talent on both sides. They definitely added in elements that will make them a much more elite defense than we've seen, you know, in the last year and a half, I would say, or season and a half. Um, but yeah, look, when you look at the games individually, when you take a step back and you go, oh, 3 wins, okay, yeah, I get why you want to put them on stock up. But you look at those wins. I mean, two of them I would chalk up to Dallas's lack of late game coaching expertise. And like I'm saying that as nice as I possibly can. You let Stewie like basically create a home, build a home in the paint when you have what 5 seconds left, something crazy like that. Like obviously she's gonna get the ball in there, she's gonna take the shot, think she got fouled or whatever it was, ends up making it a 2 point game or a 3 point game. And then Enrique's not able to finish the shot. And then you have in this last game where Satu leaves the game injury, Enrique leaves the game with ejection, and it was still a fairly close game that went down pretty close to the wire. So, like, yes, if you're looking at it as a, plus or minus, it has to be one. It can't be a zero. Then, yeah, I guess I would say like they're trending in the right direction, but not enough of growth for me to say, oh, I'm sitting here and I have any more confidence in this team to win a game than I did 2 weeks ago. Because I think realistically, when you're Seattle right now, we have expectations because of who's on this roster to win games. So like I'm not going to pat you on the back for beating a team everyone expects you to beat. You know what I mean? Um and yeah, I feel like I've been mean enough. Any rebuttal?
No, I think that's all fair. I think that's pretty valid. I'm gonna just transition into stock down here since
Before you do,
do
just
it.
want to remind the folks, if you don't know, now you do know. Winsider's been hosting some WNBA watch parties. We're using a cool new platform called Playback. We're all able to watch it together, no spoilers, which is key thing for family or friends watch parties. Uh, we've been doing it. We've been doing some free giveaways during it with vintage WNBA jerseys, posters, T-shirts, WNBA Top Shot. It's free to sign up, and seriously, it takes like less than 2 minutes to sign up. The link is getplayback.com/room/winsider. Again, that's getplayback.com/room/winsider. And this week on Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern, when the New York Liberty will be hosting the Washington Mystics, we'll be joined by guest and former Washington Mystics player Crystal Thomas. So it should be a fun one. She's going to break down what makes Coach T so good and what she's seeing with these players that she used to play with and that she used to go up against. Now, on to you, Owen, for the down teams.
I love it. All right, so I'm gonna go with the Dallas Wings this week, who we just touched on a little bit in talking about Seattle. They played those two played 2 games this week. Seattle won both, and they were fairly close. Now, I don't think a lot has changed with Dallas. In some ways, they're like the most difficult team to analyze because I don't think any team has a higher kind of upswing into downswing into upswing all in the span of 1 week potential than Dallas. Like Dallas does this all the time. So to pin them as stock trending down, stock trending up, it's like it's also fluid with them. And I think that is ultimately kind of my thesis for them being down this week is that this team at some point has to find some semblance of consistency, both in terms of rotations and in terms of performance. You can't just never know what you're going to get from your team on a nightly basis and expect to have any sort of sustainable, winning product, I think. And I mean, the main thing here, and I hate to do it, and I'm definitely not going to get into the ejection. I don't really care to discuss that, nor do I really have any original interesting thoughts on it. But Enrique, who I'll preface this by saying this is someone who I have some of her merch. I have her shirt. Her performance in the 2018 Final Four, I think, is the single greatest Final Four performance in the history of basketball. So I love Enrique, but I mean, she is signed to a supermax contract for the next handful of years. She is the face of this franchise. And we have a lot of data at this point that points to her being the worst starter in the starting five. And how do you reckon that? I mean, this is someone whose shot creation abilities are elite. but who consistently shoots bad percentages and doesn't do nearly enough in the other aspects of the game to make up for the fact that she's shooting in the mid 30%. So she's electrifying. She's great for the league. I love rooting for her. I want her to succeed, but we see time and again that this team performs better oftentimes when she's off the floor, and her former college teammate and good friend Marina Maybury is kind of the focal point of the guard rotation. I think Alicia Gray and Isabel Harrison, you could make a case that they're the two best players on this team and have been for a couple years now. But oftentimes they're kind of pushed to the back burner because it's the Arike show. And you mentioned in talking about Seattle, Arike gets ejected, but Seattle wasn't able to pull away. Well, I'd almost frame it the other way, which is like when we saw the news, after the Liberty press conferences were over yesterday that Arike had been ejected. My gut reaction was, oh, Dallas might have a chance now in this game. And that feels
Love
like
it.
mean to say. And again, I can't stress enough that I love Arike. I love her game. I love watching her, but I really want her to develop as a playmaker, as a defender, as a rebounder. There's so many aspects that she could improve upon, and we just haven't quite seen it yet. I've seen little flashes of her making really good passes. I've seen little flashes of her playing good defense, but it's never sustained. And this kind of goes back to my original point with this team, which is that it is so inconsistent to try to pin them. You can't do it. You just don't know night in and night out which version of the Wings you're getting. And I think we're kind of reaching a breaking point where it's like, all right, something has to give, because you can't just keep going along here in mediocrity. You might have to shake things up, and I don't know what form that'll take, but they've been bugging me a little bit recently.
No, I completely agree. I mean, it's funny because it's this weird enigma of like you're not going to win a champ. Like the team's better without Enrique right now. Like as we have the stats to back up that statement. It's not, whatever. Um, but if if we talk about it, like realistically, you need that star who is Enrique for those final four moments, but you can't get to those moments with the way she's playing. So it's this, what comes first, the chicken or the egg situation. Honestly, here's my thing. This team has grown, and I really and it's gonna sound ridiculous to say this after I just hated on Noel Quinn, but Vicky Johnson, like I hate putting it completely on the coaches, and I'm not putting it completely on the coaches in any of these situations. There's players that need to step up and perform better. Um, but with this one, there's like we've seen the growth in a lot of the players and this team as a whole getting better and better and better. And obviously the continuity has kind of masked some of the lack of individual player growth. But I think Rachel Galligan, um, my dear friend, had a amazing post after that Stewie and one where it's just like if you know what the play call is, if Stewie like camps out in the paint and it gets established and they can get her the ball, that's two easy buckets and probably a foul. Like that's that. Like, did you just ignore the scouting report? Did you just and it's like things like that at a certain point it goes on the coaches where you had a timeout before this play. You knew what was going down. You had time to plan it, and then it still happened. At a certain point, I'm not saying heads need to roll, but like you need to be accountable for the actions. And that's what my biggest issue is. I completely agree with everything you said. I think it's an abundance. It's, their issue is that they have too many good players. They haven't been able to find the right rotations. Now they're starting to get a little bit more of the rotations going, but at that same time, we haven't seen the individual players' growth that we've seen necessarily as a whole team. And I think that's kind of what you were pointing out when it comes specifically to Enrique, which is she can be there in the most important moments and make the most important plays. Like in that game, she almost in the first game that she wasn't ejected from, she almost hit that three, rimmed out. She hits that. It's a very different conversation right now, right? Are we talking about Seattle as an up team? Are we talking about Dallas as a down team? Probably still, but it's a very, very different situation. My down team's in Atlanta, and I was a little bit weary of picking Atlanta. Obviously, one, because I wanted to do Seattle, but Owen talked me out of it. But two, just because with Atlanta, I think they've kind of outkicked the coverage. They've done better than we've expected so far, and I think we're going to see throughout the season, they're going to kind of take those 2 steps forward and then a step back. And the reason I think we're going to see that is because of how this roster is made up. I'm going to sound like a Atlanta Dream poster boy here, but like they're trying to build a team of culture, not necessarily rack up the wins right now. And what comes with that is, yeah, you have a rookie who is just playing lights out basketball for the most part. Rookies. You have a nice set of vets who are really trying to prove themselves at this point in their career. And I just think, we're seeing what's the term? We're seeing competence. And I mean that in the most positive way. Because a lot of times these bottom dwelling teams, these teams that are stuck in the bottom, i.e. Indiana, and Atlanta of recent, and honestly of recent Minnesota too this season. Where you sit there and you go, it's the simple things that are losing them games. It's the lack of effort. It's it plays and things that just leave you head scratching. I haven't seen that from Atlanta for the most part. Now, obviously, a double digit loss is never a great thing. They only had 2 games since our last one, our last stock. So it's a little bit hard to give them a fair judgment. So I completely understand if Atlanta Dream fans are going to try and find us and burn down our house. That said, a 2 point loss to the Mercury is a tough one because I kind of do believe that they're at that same point, and that's kind of for me what really pushed them into this downswing. What do you think?
I think you nailed it in all regards. I think that like the outkicked the coverage, phrase is kind of perfect here because, like you said, and I think we had this with Indiana a couple weeks ago, maybe last week. They're all mixing together now, but where I had the Fever as a down stock, but with the caveat that it's not about the results, right? Like they are playing way better than any of us anticipated. And just because for this 1 week the stock is trending slightly down does not mean that the fans shouldn't be overwhelmingly positive about what's going on. Like the two biggest things, undeniably, from this season so far for Atlanta is that they nailed the head coaching hire. Tanisha Wright has been awesome. And
Amazing.
they nailed the draft. They traded to get the number 1 pick and took Ryan Howard, who is clearly a superstar, transcendent type of player that you build your franchise around. So, like any sort of little mild, minor critiques that we can make in season about what we're seeing on the floor is really it's inconsequential because ultimately the Dream are just trending so much in the right direction after a true disaster of a season last year. So that's what I'll say to start. But I do think it's funny too. Like, do you think Dan Padover, the new GM for the Dream and the former 2-time executive of the year with the Aces, do you think he ever like texts Tanisha and's just like, hey, could you just like chill out on winning games this year? Because ultimately, like, they're winning too many games. They they should be trying to pair Aaliyah Boston with Ryan Howard in a perfect world. And right now they're just too good for that to happen. I sometimes wonder if Padover's like, could we just chill on the winning for like one season? But ultimately, it's like, no, this is really valuable to be winning games and to just kind of exciting the fan base after putting them through just a kind of torturous season last year. So ultimately, like I'm still pretty positive on the Dream, but because they are the down stock this week, they lost a couple of games. I think there's going to be a lot more losses to come. I still don't think they're a playoff lock, although they've put themselves in a fantastic position. They'd have to fall pretty precipitously to fall out of the top 8. But I do think Phoenix is trending upward slightly. New York's trending upward. The Sparks we still have to see, but there's still a scenario here where the Dream could find themselves in the lottery, and that wouldn't be a bad thing at all. I think that just to go to the numbers here real quickly, still first in defense, still kind of on a historic defensive trajectory, although it's regressed to the mean slightly this past week. But the offense is a disaster. And this is even more credit to Ryan Howard. The fact that she's putting up the numbers and really posting the efficiency that she has been as a rookie is mind boggling because she has no help. Cheyenne Parker's awesome, clearly the second best player, but not cut out to be the second best offensive player on a good team, even though I have nothing but good things to say about Cheyenne's game. But this team is 12th in the league in offense. They're 12th in turnover percentage. They're 12th in assist percentage. So they are in the cellar when it comes to passing the ball, when it comes to turning the ball over, and when it comes to scoring. And it's just because they don't have any options. I mean, it's all Howard. It's the Howard show. And again, the fact that she's doing this with such a weak offensive supporting cast is kind of remarkable. But they're gonna keep losing more games this year, and it's really not a bad thing in the grand scheme of things. But that's kind of why the stock is down right now. It's like it's hard to win games when you don't score the ball, and that is some profound analysis on my part. Real groundbreaking stuff here on the Winsidr.
I think I heard one of the announcers this week say, no, you know what? It was Jim Suhan in the Show Reeve podcast, where he said something to the effect of, uh, "Basketball is a game of making baskets and missing or made shots and missed shots."
It's a make or miss league, baby.
Yeah, it's a make or miss league. Maybe that was it. Stock watch.
Doc Watch.
Dun-na-na, dun-na-na. All right, I'm gonna list a couple teams. I'm gonna do a brief one and then put you on the spot, and you can list whatever the hell you want.
Uh-oh.
The two teams that are the biggest on my stock watch, I'm gonna avoid the one that I've been beaten all over the place. Phoenix Mercury and the LA Sparks. Now, the reason I got them both on the stock watch is the same exact thing. Mercury on a 3-game win streak, Sparks on a 2-game lose streak, lost Derek Fisher also, might be an addition by subtraction, but then they just got mopped by the Aces the other day with the first game in the post Derek Fisher era of the Los Angeles Sparks. I'm more so than like having a prediction of either of these teams. I mean, I do believe that the Mercury are going to continue to dip south. LA Sparks, I think, are just kind of gonna ride the wave like somebody in a floaty out in the ocean, right? Like going up and down and up and down, and it's gonna be a rough season, but they're gonna be a fun one. So those are my two stock watches, two teams that I fully expect to be on WNBA stocks in the next week or so.
All right, well, I'll give you two as well. One of them is one of the teams you mentioned, which was going to be my stock watch, which is the Mercury. This is a team that, as you mentioned, just won 3 in a row. And they kind of have a fairly brutal schedule this week. They have a back-to-back on the road, Tuesday night at Washington, Wednesday night at Indiana, and then Friday in Dallas. So that's 3 games in 4 days on the road, and not just on the road, but I mean Washington to Indiana,
All over the country.
Dallas. The travel is very, very bad. So, don't be surprised if the Mercury, kind of come back to earth after this scorching 3-game win streak. But I do want to kind of see how they continue to play. I think Shea Petty has been like one of the most under talked about great performers of this season, really playing awesome basketball off the bench, and they really need it. 25 minutes a game from somebody off the bench like that. So they're one of my teams, and then the other team I'm going to mention here is your squad, the Minnesota Lynx. Now, do I want to watch the Minnesota Lynx play basketball right now? No. So it might be a little counterintuitive to place them on the stock watch here. I'm just curious to see some of the minutes that are received after Sylvia Fowles, super unfortunately suffered an injury and is going to be out here for a while. I mean, are they going to go full tank? Are they going to be completely unwatchable? Are we actually going to kind of see some players start to shine just by virtue of the fact that they need to step up and someone needs to score buckets? Minnesota hosts Seattle tomorrow night. That one is going to be on ESPN. And then Minnesota later in the week will travel to Vegas. So those could be some really rough games and some big losses. And again, I don't really want to watch Minnesota, but I'm just curious to see what the rotations are like. what Cheryl Reeve is going to do now that it just seems like a complete lost season. So many perplexing, moves in the off season. I think, namely Crystal Dangerfield, who we're seeing thrive in New York. What are you doing? But those are the teams I'm going to have my eye out for this week.
Yeah, no, hey, I'm with it. Realistically, though, let's what they're 8 games back from first place and just 2 games behind the Mercury and the Sparks and the Liberty. Look, we're a third of the season in. I think it's totally fair and realistic for us to sit here and talk about these teams. I think it might be a little much, even though we are definitely entering tank conversation when it comes to the Minnesota Lynx. But if we're talking about the Lynx, can't go a podcast without mentioning Nikolina Milic, who had just a baller of a game the other night against Indiana in the 84-80 loss. Lots of questions behind that. We're not going to go into that game. Milic in 30 minutes drops 23, a new career high. Shockingly, only 6 rebounds and 3 assists also. Milic is a player that I'm just so hyped on, and I hope, look, is she going to fill the shoes of Sylvia Fowles next season? No. But if Nikolina Milic is not in the league next season, you're going to have a very, very angry podcast host. As always, thanks everybody for joining us. Sorry this episode went a little long. Reminder, join us Thursday as we welcome Crystal Thomas to the playback show as we do a little watch party. #watch with Winsidr. Have a good one.